All right, good morning. How's everyone? Yeah, got a couple of nods, right? For a Wednesday, I guess that's not bad. I wanted to remind you about this. I know we've talked about it a couple of times, right? Have we talked about it in here yet? Yes, right. Starting to blur together. It's like that time in every class, right? Like first exams are coming around. So we will finish up chapter 6 today. And I don't know if it'll take us the whole time, but we definitely have a few minutes of our documentary to watch with the same wonderful music. But we'll finish that up today, and then our next class on Monday will be not here in person, but on campus. So remember, on Monday, you don't need to come here, right? Nobody will be here in class, it'll just be on campus. So sometime on Monday, whether it's during this class time of 8:30 to 9:45, or anytime before basically midnight, make sure you take exam number 1 on campus. So just one more time really quickly here. Ready? That's okay. So if you go on Canvas and you click on quizzes right here, that's where you can find that first exam. So exam number 1 will open up at 12:01 a.m. and then it'll close at 11:59 p.m. So just sometime on Monday. I've given you this time, this hour and 15 minutes, but you're welcome to sleep in and take it later. If that works better for you, that's totally fine. It's 73 questions and you have 75 minutes. So it's a little more than a minute per question, but some of them are true, false, which should be really quick. There's a mainly multiple choice, a couple of short answer, but they're all like listing things and stuff like that. It's never going to be essays or anything along those lines. So this is where you'll come to take that when you are ready to do that on Monday. Just make sure sometime before basically midnight. And then remember that the study guide is also on here. If you click on modules, you can find study guide number 1 right here. And anything that's on the study guide will be on the test, right? So if it's on here, make sure you know it, chapters 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And then there's also the 2 diagrams of anatomy that you will be labeling. So just to make sure that you, again, are feeling comfortable with where to find the study guide, where to find the exam. I will send out an announcement probably Sunday night to remind you, just in case you forgot. But I won't see you on Monday. I will see you Wednesday after that, and then we'll start the next unit. And as a side note, you will get a score right away. When you submit your exam, you'll get a score for everything but the short answer questions. So all of the true, false, and multiple choice are graded like instantly. And then I will be grading the short answer just kind of throughout the day. So you'll get those points added later, but everything else you'll be able to see how you did right off the bat. Okay, so most of your points will be there, and then the rest I'll fill in later that day. I think that's everything I wanted to say about the exam, just reminders. But any questions at all about the test, study guide, anything at all? I think you'll all be in really good shape with your notes and your book and all of that. You should do really well. Again, I would really recommend you study. Don't wait till the very end of Monday to take it, just because it's always the case that something goes wrong when you do that. So just try and give yourself plenty of time. I also want to point something out. It's not due for a little while. It's not due for about, 3 weeks from now. But remember that you do have 2 short assignments that you're doing in here. And a couple of you have been asking me questions about it. And so I want to just bring it up so it's on your mind. And if you happen to be going somewhere where you can start working on one of these, you can go ahead and do that. So if you click on assignments right here, remember you have 2 short homework assignments. There were 25 points, so more than an activity, but way less than an exam. So if we click on this first one, which is due in October, I have a little assignment menu, if you will, that you can choose from. And you're going to be doing 2 of these throughout the semester. So you'll pick 1 for this assignment and 1 for the next assignment. And I mentioned this, I think, a little bit when we talked about this in the beginning. If you ever have an idea for something that's not listed here, you can always run it by me. I definitely have had people suggest some stuff, and I usually am fine with it as long as it fits in the parameters. So if you click on this menu, we'll let this open up here. Basically, what you'll be doing for each one of these is some kind of activity or creating something and then writing a short paper about it. And my point and goal with these is to kind of push your boundaries a little bit. So if there's something in here that sounds really uncomfortable, I kind of hope you pick that one. It's up to you, but pick something that like pushes you a little bit. You'll be doing one for this part and then one for the next one. So some of the things that you can do, one of them is you can go birthday shopping. You don't actually have to buy anything, but you'll go to like Target or Walmart or any store that sells toys. I should eliminate this. We used to have a Kmart, not anymore. It's been a long time. That was like really old. I missed that somehow. But if you go to any store that sells toys, what you'll do is you'll go in and you'll say that you're shopping for twins, and you'll ask for recommendations from the employees and see what they recommend for one boy and one girl. And you'll just kind of record that. You'll go to 2 different places that sell toys, and you'll look at the toys, how gendered are they? What are the suggestions that people make, and writing a little bit of a paper about it. Another option, if you want to kind of think about your sexuality and reflect on it, you can fill out a questionnaire and answer some questions about your sexuality. And that one is kind of you don't have to go anywhere for that one, but you can think about and reflect on your sexuality. Condom shopping. Again, you don't actually have to buy condoms unless you need them, and then it's a 2-for-1, right? Like, why not? But if you want to choose this one, you'll go to a couple of different places that sell condoms. You'll write down where they are. Are they being videotaped? Did you feel comfortable standing there? What did they sell? How much are they? Kind of elements of that. I really encourage you to go to different kinds of stores. So let's say you go to Target and a gas station, right? And like, how are they different? Are some of them like under surveillance? Are you being watched very carefully? Or are they like tucked in a corner? So kind of thinking about all of those things. And again, you don't have to buy them, but you're welcome to. You can go get tested for STIs. You can do that here. And I also gave you a couple of other places in the community where you can go do that for free or for very low cost. And then you don't have to actually share your results with me, but you'll talk about the process and what you got tested for and how it went and how you felt and all of that. You can pick a sperm donor. You would go online, and I gave you some places to do that. And you would look for what elements are you interested in a sperm donor? What characteristics would you look for? As a side note, I once had somebody go and be a sperm donor as an alternate, right? He asked me, he said, can I go donate sperm? I make a little bit of money from it and I can do it for the assignment. I was fine with that, and that was kind of cool. So you could go on either side here. You can pick a donor online and write about that, or you could even go be a donor if you want. One of my favorite ones, going to an adult store or a sex shop. So this one, if that sounds terrifying, please choose it. Like, I really want you to do that. Take someone with you. Take a classmate, a friend, a family member, or whatever. Go with somebody for safety. Right? I'll drag my father-in-law. No, I'm just kidding. My poor father-in-law probably hates me. That's okay. But I want you to go to 2 different stores that are like sex shops, and one of them needs to be one of these 2, unless you talk to me. But I want you to go somewhere that I know is like a very positive, clean, nice environment, and then you are welcome to go to another one of your choosing. But both of these stores in Hollywood are quite big. They're very like sex positive, very like nice, and very open, visible stores. So I want you to have at least one experience with one of those, and then you can go wherever you want for the other. You have to ask a question about a product you know nothing about while you're there, and a couple of other things that are on here. So you'll go to the store and then write a paper. Again, you don't need to buy anything, but if you want to, you're welcome to. There's another one you can do where you choose sex and advertising, looking at ads and how they use sexuality to advertise. You could make like a media presentation or print them out or put them in a document and then write about it. You can find a couple of movies that highlight topics related to this class, and then you're going to describe scenes from the movies that highlight a concept that we've covered and kind of write about them. You could do an art project. This one has been really creative over time. I've seen a lot of like fun stuff. It could be a painting, a sculpture, anything creative. It can be a collage. I've seen all sorts of different things. I usually hang them in my window downstairs, and then people stop and like stare at them, and it's quite entertaining for me. But an art project that you'll create something and then write a short paper about it. You can also do a book report. If you wanted to, you could pick a book that relates to something we're talking about in here and read it, and then you'll do a quick report on that. And each one of these are all worth the same number of points. So you can choose whichever one sounds good. You'll be choosing 2 in total over the semester. So pick one for now and another one later. They're worth up to 25 points. And again, if you have an idea, please feel free to run it by me. I've had people go to strip clubs and write about that. I've had people interview someone and write about that. I've had all sorts of different things. So I'm very open to that. If you have an idea, feel free to run it by me. But this first one is due October 12th. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of an explanation about it. So if you happen to be going somewhere where you're looking at condoms or birthday presents or going to a sex shop over the weekend, you could always use it for this, right, over the next few weeks. So when you are ready to do this, you will submit it through here, but it's not due for a few weeks. Focus on the exam for now, but I just wanted to make sure you're thinking about this because some of them require a little bit of planning ahead of time. Okay. I think these are fun, personally. I love reading these papers because I think they're really interesting. But are there any questions or anything about the homework assignment, about the exam on Monday? Anything related to either? Before we get back to male anatomy? Is that, oh, I thought you were.
Is it, what form is the test?
What was that?
The test is multiple choice.
Yeah, so I think you might have walked in after we talked about it, but no, it's okay. So it's mainly multiple choice. So the vast majority are multiple choice. Then there's a handful of true, false, and then a handful of short answer questions, 73 in total. And it should be plenty of time on average. My classes last semester or last year, I only teach this in the fall. Last fall, they took about 59, 60 minutes to take the exam. So it should be plenty of time as long as you're organized and have studied and prepared. If you're trying to look everything up, it'll be really tight, but otherwise you should be in good shape.
Open notes.
Yeah, open notes, open books. So as I mentioned before, if it were me, I would type out or write out everything on the study guide and have it in front of me. That way I'm not looking in the book or the lecture and trying to search for stuff, but it's totally up to you. Worth 100 points though. So make sure you are, prepared and ready to go. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything else for now? Okay. So let's go back to male anatomy, right? We finished last time talking about the life of a sperm cell and talking a lot about spermatogenesis, right? In that whole long process. We have just a couple of slides left to talk about. Some concerns related to male sexual functioning and then male sexual health, just like we talked about with women. And this is something that we talked about a little bit previously, but we'll get into it a little more here. For women, we watched part of that documentary about, the appearance and size of breasts and how that tends to be something that women are very pressured related to. Men's equivalent here would obviously be penis size. And that's something in our culture that gets a lot of attention, right? A lot of pressure. And we talked about this previously, that the vaginal canal is only 4 inches naturally, right? I mean, obviously it can stretch and expand, but we have all these kind of expectations and jokes and concerns and, all sorts of things related to male penis size. The average size of the male penis erect is about 6 inches, right? And it's actually pretty rare that people are much larger than that or much smaller than that, right? Between 5 to 6 inches is really, really common. Being more than like 7 inches long is about 15% of the population, and that's it, right? So for all the stereotypes and expectations we have, 5 to 6 inches on average is kind of the average penis size. But it's definitely something that tends to really heavily contribute to a lot of people's view of their worth as a lover, as a partner, how masculine they are. It definitely tends to be something that can shape that for a lot of men. And it's something that's definitely worth talking about. There's also a lot of jokes about it as well. We were watching like an old blue collar comedy tour, like comedy show a while back, and there was a whole little excerpt in there about penis size, and I thought it was pretty funny, and so I'll play it for you. It's only like a minute or two long, but I think it gets at some of these stereotypes of like, how can you tell if somebody has like a large penis with the big hands or big feet and all these like kind of funny little correlational stereotypes that we have that don't really hold up to be true. But let me play this for you. It's just about a minute and a half. A lot of these expectations, right? A lot of norms related to this, jokes related to this, and just a kind of a standard in our culture, and something that a lot of men do definitely worry about. And you'll see that a little bit more in the documentary that we'll watch part of in a little bit. So that's one thing that's up here. The other, circumcision, and I'm sorry for the potentially traumatic image that's up here for some of you, but circumcision is the surgical removal of the foreskin of the penis. And you can see kind of here what this would look like, of kind of trimming back and removing the surgically the foreskin in the front, sewing it off, right? And this is something that is traditionally done within the first 48 hours of a baby being born. It's a decision a lot of parents have to make. I have all girls, so I didn't have to worry about this. Though I will say when my first was born, they paused an incredibly long time before telling us what her sex was. And I remember in that what was probably only 3 seconds going oh my God, we didn't even talk about circumcision, right? Because the whole time during pregnancy, my daughter Kaya was super modest. Every time we do an ultrasound, she would turn away or wrap her legs closed. And so we could never with 100% certainty determine that she was female. We were 95% sure, but when they pulled her out, my partner had a C-section, there was congratulations, and there was a 3-second pause. And in my mind, this was all I could think of was what are we going to do if it's a boy? But it was a girl. But this is something that a lot of parents have to decide very early, right? And there's a lot of cultural expectations and beliefs around this as well. When we talked about this back in chapter 1, this is something that is really credited to ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt back in the 6th dynasty were the first people, the first culture that we have documented to practice circumcision. Now, as I said, we do it when a baby is under 48 hours old. They would do it as a rite of passage for teenagers, as a public ceremony with a stone blade, as we talked about a little bit before. Slightly different procedure there, a lot older. And this doesn't have to be something that is done at birth. It can be done later in life, but it is in the vast majority of cases done right off the bat. 55% to 65% of all newborn boys are circumcised in the United States. It is by far the norm, but that leaves a lot of people who aren't circumcised as well. Yeah. They give them a local anesthetic, so they don't put them under, but they do inject an anesthetic into the pelvic region to numb them. So it's not necessarily something that they would feel. They would feel the shot, right? So they definitely would cry probably from the shot. But other than that, it tends to be a very quick procedure and they heal very quickly. Very rarely do things go wrong with it. But the injection of the anesthetic would be something they would feel. But then there's a lot of injections that babies get right after birth, right? I wasn't prepared for this. And oh man, I wanted to stab one of the nurses back. She gave my daughter a shot and then they took blood from her 6 times right after she was born. I was like, my turn, right? My turn, come here. Right? I wanted to get her back. I was all mad because it makes them cry, obviously. But this is something parents can you can't be in the room, but they oftentimes will let you watch if you want to watch. Many parents are very protective over a newborn baby. And so they will feel the injection, but that's it. And they might have some soreness, obviously, in recovering, but hard to know how bad that would be for them at such a young age. Yeah.
So are parents always given an option?
Yeah, I mean, in the United States, with the vast majority of healthcare systems, yes, it's your choice of the parent. So what they would do is they would ask you ahead of time, and then they typically check in with you again after that baby's been born, because it's typically scheduled after a person gives birth. They stay in the hospital 1 to 3 days on average. 1 day if it's a vaginal birth, up to 3 days if it's a cesarean, because it takes longer to recover. And so it's typically done in that very small window. And so they'll ask you again after birth, do you still want to do this? And then they schedule it. So yeah, it would never be done without choice, at least here in our country, that tends to be the norm. Yeah.
On the circumcision, I remember that my son,
Yeah.
they will anesthetize them. They gave them sucrose or something. They said they did not have sucrose.
That's just sugar though.
But it kind of goes along with when a rabbi does oil.
Mm-hmm.
Wine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's some interesting.
anesthesia.
Not at that time, because now they give them sometimes it's topical and other times it's an injection. It depends on the hospital and the doctor and the insurance company. Yeah, and then there are interesting cultural practices too, like, where people have like a brisk, right, or like different. Yeah, and I was invited to attend one once, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to go to that. I'll come after for the cake, right? But yeah, but I mean, there are cultures and cultural beliefs around this as well, where it is kind of like a rite of passage or an ordeal that's done right after birth. Typically, it's done within a hospital, but you do have that right as a parent to decide. Where it gets tricky is a lot of people feel that that young man should have that choice, right? But a baby can't choose that, obviously. And it's in our culture, this is something that is done that age, right? At 48 hours old or younger. And so that's one of the biggest cons of this is a lot of people say that that boy should have had the choice whether to be circumcised or not. And so a lot of people will not circumcise their son and give them the choice to do that later if they would like to. And so it's kind of a debate. Yeah.
With getting circumcised at an older age, is there a reason why it's normally done usually the first 48 hours?
Yeah, it's just I think a norm to do it that young. Everything is like small and underdeveloped. And so what happens is it's a minor procedure versus when you do it later and like somebody has like a fully formed and developed penis, it can be a little bit more painful, a longer procedure, and there might be a little bit more recovery involved. But there is kind of a growing trend of not doing this to little boys to give them that choice. And it is an outpatient procedure with just like a topical anesthetic later. So it's not a massive procedure to be done, but it can sometimes be difficult for healing. People can obviously get infections. And then there's one of the other cons is that it's thought to maybe reduce sensitivity. So, it is something that's typically done early, but more and more people are waiting because they want to give their sons the opportunity to make that choice for themselves, right? There was Aspen, did you ever hear?
Is there, like, what's the healing process?
Yeah, it's actually quite minor when you do it when they're little, which is why it traditionally is done that way. So by cutting back the foreskin, right, and then removing it, there's basically a couple of like stitches that are done. And then those heal, and they usually do ones that just dissolve out, they don't have to be removed. Couple of days, right? And then everything kind of back to normal. And obviously that baby's not going to remember it, right? It's something that's relatively like minor in the scope of what they've been through in those 48 hours, right? So the recovery is pretty minor from this procedure. When they're little, could be a little more intense when someone is older. Yeah. Really? No,
Circumcised. He's not. So he's like 13 and he gets one.
okay.
And I was just asking, my question is, every time he gets erect, the stitches break. Is that like a real thing that happens?
I mean, so usually after a procedure like that, if you're older, right? So if you're a teenager or an adult or whatever, it would be important to try and not have an erection for a few days while those stitches are healing. After that, not a problem. But while the stitches are healing, if you were to like have an erection, it could in theory stretch them and be painful while that penis is healing, right? So it could take a couple of days, and then usually after that, it's not a big deal. But yeah, I mean, people do decide to do this later. It by far is the norm, right, to circumcise boys, right? And oftentimes when someone is uncircumcised, it's almost viewed as abnormal in a way. And it's not, but because it's the majority that do it, we tend to have that kind of stereotype. So one of the biggest advantages to doing this is it fits the norm, right? And oftentimes the kind of the ideal or the standard or the kind of typical portrayal of what like a penis would look like, somebody getting circumcised will fit that norm, right? So that is one big pro for doing this. Another one is it has a lot of significant health benefits. The problem with one issue that sometimes people run into when they're not circumcised is bacteria can build up behind the foreskin and the head of the penis, right? And so people can get a lot more infections. It's going to be difficult to keep that area as clean, right? So one of them is kind of covered and the other is open. And so there's a big difference in like the number of infections and cleanliness that people are able to maintain. So those are the biggest things, health benefits, normality, and then kind of religious beliefs. A lot of religions believe in doing this. And the cons being that it may alter like sensitivity. It can be painful, especially if you're older, and it doesn't give the person the right to choose. And that's something I think as a culture, we've gotten more and more in touch with, wanting people to have that right and have that ability to choose if they would like to. So again, something to think about if you ever have children one day, or if you are knowing somebody who is, this is a decision that you have to make often very early, but it can be done later if you don't do it when they're little. Okay? It's just a little more involved later on. Other thoughts or questions or comments or anything? I weighed all those pros and cons in like 3 seconds in my head, right? When I didn't know. Like, thankfully, I didn't have to worry about it. But House of Girls. A couple of other things, male genital health concerns. So women go to an OBGYN, an obstetrician gynecologist. Men tend to go to a urologist. Now, urologists see men and women. They can see anyone. It's someone who tends to deal with kind of the reproductive tract for men, and also any kind of like anything related to like urination, right? And like a lot of issues related to that realm. So urinary tract diseases in both sexes is something that a urologist would help with. But very important, just like with women, that men are engaging in regular checks. Now, they don't tend to have to do anything like breast exams or obviously any kind of like pap smear and that kind of stuff. But they do oftentimes have to have prostate checks, right? And to be checked for other conditions that are commonly affecting men. So some of the things that can affect men most frequently, there's a condition called Priapism, where erections tend to be long lasting and painful. Right. So it's not related to sexual desire. Sometimes men will get an erection and it's not at all connected to desire. It's almost like a automatic spinal reflex that they did not want to have. And it can sometimes be painful and not go away. Right. So this is something that can happen. It can also happen with medications, right? I'm sure you've heard, you know, the like jokes and stereotypes. You take something like Viagra, it can lead to like a 4-hour long erection that doesn't stop. It's a little bit different. This is like a condition that someone might be born with versus the other would be medically induced by a medication. Yeah. Yeah, right. They want you to go to a hospital. Yeah, at that point, because what happens is a lot of your blood flow is being rerouted, right? And so at long term, having that happen could be somewhat dangerous for you. It's not super common, but it definitely can happen. Penile and testicular cancer are two things that tend to affect men a lot as well, like breast cancer and cervical cancer in women. So important to be checking for these things and screening for them. Prostate cancer is the most frequently diagnosed cancer among men. Second leading cause of death for men after lung cancer. And then there's also something called prostatitis, where people can have an enlarged or inflamed prostate as the result of an infection. People can also get just kind of general infections, especially more common in those who are uncircumcised, as we just talked about. So very important for men to be getting checkups on these things once they become sexually active or enter into puberty. Right? So these are things that would be checked regularly. And as I mentioned before, men can also develop breasts. It's not very common, but it definitely can happen. There's a whole range of that. Men developing breasts, it's a condition called gynecomastia. It's not very common, but it does occasionally happen. And men can, in theory, get breast cancer, though it's exceedingly rare. So these are the kind of the big male genital health concerns. And again, a urologist would be the one you would go to, or your just kind of traditional medical doctor could also help you with this stuff as well. And then I'll put this up at the end. This is the diagram that's in your study guide. So I'll leave that up at the very end today if you want to take a picture of it, just to help you in completing that. But as I told you, I want to show you the male equivalent, right? So private dicks, men exposed, right? It's got the same awful, fantastic music in it. I think it's toned down maybe a little.